Okay, so the first part is installing Face AI. And to install Face AI is very simple, but I'm here now in 4.27 and there's one special thing, but I cover that when we come to that. Okay, so the first thing is we need to make sure the plugins are installed and activated. So the first one is AGR Pro, so we enable this. The second one is Easy Ballistics, here, enable this. And normally what you would do is also Power IK, but for 4.27, Power IK is not yet updated, so we cannot install it yet, but so we have to do something when we install the AI. Okay, so but these two plugins for now we activate, and then what we want to do is save all. We need to restart the project, and we go here, Face AI. That's a demo project I created here, 4.27. So here we are. Okay, now, and we go back to the Epic Games launcher. We go to Face AI. Here we go. Add it to a project. Face AI 4.27. Add it to the project. Verifying. Perfect. We don't need this anymore. And now if we go back to content, we have this. Now we need to do one thing before we start. Actually two. First of all, we go to Advanced AI folder, then Utility, then Data, and we have here this DT animation tag that we need to plug in basically in our project settings. We just search tags in here, and here we have gameplay tag table list. We go in here, and if we click on this field, we go here, but we can also just do this if we have it selected. And these are basically all the tags we use with AGR Pro. These are of course mine. You can do them, you can change them up and do them yourself as you go away or add something to it. But just so you know, this is all the gameplay tags you need for the animation later. Okay, so we close this. Next thing, because we don't have the Power IK, it doesn't really break anything per se. But if we go to Base AI Animation Blueprint, so here, open it. So we open this now. If we go to animation graph, as you can see here, we have no connection there. This is because here you would normally plug in the IK system you have. So if you have Power IK, or I think it's called Dragon IK, it's another version where you use IK for your AI, you can plug this in here and it will all work fine. But because we don't have it for this version yet, I'm sure it will come because it says it's in active development by Epic. It will be updated, so it's just for now. So we just from the full body slot we go to final pose. We save this, and as you see, he also goes already back into an animation. And this is basically it for the installation process. Now we check it. He has to compile some shaders because it's the first time I open it up. Okay, now that we have compiled the project, everything should work. We can test it. They're attacking someone. They're moving. He sits down. They're fighting. And if we go all the way back there, he probably already won the duel, and he goes just patrolling around. Perfect, perfect. So this is it for the installing project. I think it's very quick and uncomplicated. And next up, we go into setting things up a little bit. Okay, for part 2, what we're going to check is how to set up the player character so that the AI actually knows who we are and can get some information from us. And that also shows you how you can get information from them. Okay, so as an example, we have player here, advanced player example. And the first thing you want to do when you set up for your player character, you go to class settings, and then in interfaces you add the AI exchange interface. You just click here, add, and then AI exchange interface. It's not showing up here because it's already added. But once this is added, you can go here to the left side, and here's interface reactions. That is not really important to you, but exchange kind of is. So you can go to information. This I'm gonna show you later on how you can also use this, but for now, the most important part for your player is to set up the information. That is the tank score, max health, and health percentage. These needs to be plugged in because based on that, the AI will basically decide whom they should attack if they have multiple options of attacks. Okay, so if you're not the only person they can attack, they need this to kind of decide. If you don't have a tank score, that gives you probably something from armor or weapons or whatever. You don't need to create this variable, but something needs to send in here, and 0 is the lowest probability and 5 is the highest probability. But the tank score is not everything. So health and health percentage play also a big role, and also distance to the AI. Okay? So after this, what we also need to add is the AI team coordinator. We just go to add components, AI team coordinator. Here, you don't really need to set up anything here. If you want, you can set up a tag here, player, but also important is that you set in your player itself that you set the tag to player or whatever you want, but just there needs to be a tag that the AI can basically search for. Okay. Yes, so this is basically all for now that we need to set up in the player. And in the next round, before we start really setting up the AI, I'm going to show you how to set up the animations. Okay, so let's go to part 3. Okay, now we want to add some animations to our characters. So to make this video not super long, I'm first going to show you how to basically set up the animations that you just imported, maybe from the marketplace or something, that have an Unreal Engine skeleton, but not the Unreal Engine skeleton of the AI. Okay, so it's the same skeleton, but it names differently, so it's not compatible with each other, and you need to basically exchange it from the animation to use the skeleton from the AI, because there are also some sockets and stuff like this that need to be set up. So what you do, for example, I get the Spear and Halberd animation set from Kobold. I will link it in the description. He makes amazing animations. Just try them out. So, but we go in here, and what we need to locate is basically the skeleton from the UA mannequin, right? So here, UA mannequin skeleton. You can probably also simply search for animation and then animation and then skeleton, and here we find it as well. And all you really need to do is delete it, and now set here delete the asset and update reference to point at an asset of your choosing. This is what we need to select, and we need to go to the AI skeleton. So basically what he does is he deletes a skeleton and replaces this with this skeleton. And it is never a problem as long as these are the standard Unreal Engine skeletons. If they have some extra bones, they will automatically be added there. So you can just say replace reference. Okay. And save selected. And now this is gone because it's deleted. But now if you go to animations in this asset, and for example in place, and you go in here, you can see it's already replaced with the Face AI mannequin. And he uses now the same skeleton that our AI uses from this pack. So now these animations can all be used by the AI. Okay, so I go in here. I already copied some of my animations in here, just so we save a little bit of time, so that this video doesn't get like 10 hours long. Now, what we're gonna take a look at is first how to set animation montages. These are all basically the attacks from the AI, right? So here we have the spear animations, which are the same animation we just added. How you add an animation montage is basically, let me actually open this up and go to the animation. All you really need to do is right click this and say create anim montage, and you created a montage. Okay, so then we open the montage, and here are a few things you need to set up. Okay, so let's zoom in a little bit. Okay, as you can see down here we have a timeline. First thing you want to add is AGR combat activate weapon. You add this by saying right click and then add notifies, and here's AGR combat activate weapon. You add this, so you see it's the same thing. And here on the right side you can see you can type in some things. Delete this now. As you can see here we have clear other weapons. This is only important if you have like two weapons in each hand, and they both have like traces for the hit traces basically, right? And here's activate weapon by name, spear. Okay, this is very important because let's go to our AI, base AI, the main main blueprint. Basically, find it under advanced AI, base AI, and we go in here. We check this later out in more detail later. But what we need to do is we need to go to AGR setup, no, to the combat master setup. This looks a bit busy here, but it's very simple. Basically what we have, here you see the first thing is already the spear. We give it a name, and the second here is a spear mesh. And if you go here to the left, tracker spear. Let's go to the viewport. It's hidden at the moment. But if we select it and go down and we say visible, so it is okay. For some reason it's a little bit busy here. It doesn't really set up, so I don't know what went wrong there. I have to check this later on. So let's just say we go to tracker R because this is definitely working. We go to visible, and as you can see, it is parented to his hand. It is parented to his hand, and basically it follows the shape of a sword he would carry, right? So this is basically the tracker object if you give him a sword in the hand. And this would track a trace, and if the trace hits another AI or hit another thing that should be damaged, it gets damaged, right? And to tell the animation what tracker, because you have several trackers on this guy, what tracker to activate, you basically need to tell him in the setup, basically here, this is the name of this tracker. This tracker is called spear. And then in the animation here, activate weapon, you say spear. So you activate this specific tracker in the animation. Okay, this is all that is. Next, whoops, we go a bit closer. We have voice. Okay, voice notify is basically, you can say here, shout, speak, activity, idle, and damage. This is also in here. So let's see where we have this, and it's probably voice box here. This is play voice, and as you can see, here's an enumeration. Here we have shout, speak, activity, idle, and damage. So when this AI does this attack, there's a certain chance, I think it's around 66%, that he will say something if you plug in something here. So basically in this voice box, you can plug in whatever he should say when one of these enumerations are triggered, right? If he gets damaged, he has a damaged voice, so he goes like or whatever, right? And if he shouts, come here, bastard, or whatever. You can all plug this in here. And here's an example how to do it. Of course, you can use all of these, and you just decide which one of these are targeted by choosing one of these here, right? You can, of course, go in the enumeration and add some extra ones there, right? Same thing with dodge. Um, the dodge is basically, you don't have to set up anything there. At this point in time, the AI says, the enemy AI basically says, okay, we are going to dodge. And I think this is 66% as well, or 33%. Let's actually check, because I'm going to show you how you find the animation notifies, and you find them right here. Here we have the shoot notify, spell notify, we come to that later. But we have the dodge notify. And in this dodge notify, what you have is basically here. If it's bigger than 7, so it's around 30% that the enemy AI tries to dodge this attack. So if you use this attack, if you don't add this dodge notify, the enemy AI will basically not be able to dodge because they don't know when, right? And depending on where you set it in this animation, they will know earlier that they have to dodge, or if you set it very late, it will always be a close call if they dodge. And if you have several dodge animation, maybe some of them will work to dodge the attack and some will not, so you can do this. And also this dodge notify also is used for the player. So if the player does an attack, in his attack montages, you also need a dodge modifier to be able to make the AI you're fighting against dodge. Okay, so it's very important to notify, right? And you should add this. Personally, my preference to add this to every single attack. What you can do, of course, you can always go in here and say 5. So now it's a 50% chance that they dodge, or you say 8. So it's just a 20% chance that they dodge. Okay, so this is very important. Next is play sound. It's simply, play a sound. And of course, you always just press right click and then add notify, and you find them here. Dodge notify, whatever, right? And play sound, I think, is a vanilla notify somewhere. Yeah, I don't find it, but it's a normal notify. You see here, you just plug in some kind of sound, maybe like a sword swish, when they swing the sword and stuff like this. But then we have also the trail, it's just the weapon trail. And then we have AGR combat trace. And this is very important. You also go right click, add notify, and then it should be here somewhere. Trace. Oh, notify states. Oh, there we go. This is a notify states AGR trace hit. And what this is basically, you can have more than one, by the way. So this is basically the duration in which the tracker we set will trace this this attack. So in this range, the attack or the animation is able to damage the other AI. But maybe in one animation you have like 2 different kinds of swings, right? So you can have several traces, and both of these traces, you don't need to activate them twice. You can just put them in, and now he has 2 traces in which he can damage the AI, and they're also separate damage instances. So they are not just like if you're hit with the first trace, you cannot damage him anymore. It's both these traces can hit the player. If you don't want that, what you need to do is you make one long trace for this weapon, and then he can only damage them once, even if he attacks twice in one animation. Okay, so this is basically how you set up. And the last thing, very important, is default group needs to be set to full body or upper body. because these are the two groups we need to play this animation. We set that up in the animation master blueprint. We come to that in a second. Right, so these are very important that you set full body, and normally you want for this attack a root motion attack. I personally always use root motion attacks in my montages. Okay, so that's for the montage. Now let's go back to animation because there's a lot more to cover. The next thing we want to see is animation cycles, basically, right? Blend spaces. And here we can also go to actually to the, let's see, spear walk. Okay, if we go in here, you see, oh, I don't see my mouse there for some reason, which is a little bit annoying. Okay, for some reason I cannot see my mouse while I record, which is really odd. So I'm gonna tell you, and I try to record it in a later video and overlays. But basically, what you do, we can see it here on the left. We have one horizontal axis with direction which goes from 180 to minus 180 to 180 in 8 grids. And then we have the speed. This goes from 0 to 600 in 12 grids. But you have to find out what works best for you. But basically, what you need to do is you plug in the middle right here. I show here on the top because I cannot see that. You cannot see my mouse here. So in the middle, you plug in basically the forward walk. And on the left and far right side, here and here, you plug in how he walks back. In the left side, you show him here how he walks to the left. Here you show him how he walks to the right. Here how to walk basically to the right and back. He is right in front. He is left in front, and he is left and back. Right, so this is basically the direction, the horizontal axis, and the axis from here to here is basically here on the left. You see, so here the lowest row is basically the idle. The first row is the walk. Here is a run, and here is a sprint. Right, so you have it divided like this. I'm gonna make sure I show you a little video of that later on and add it to the video. Okay, so and then the last thing you also want to add here is target weight interpolation is 4. This just works best for me, but of course go nuts and try some things out, right? So once we have, so this is basically the animation blueprint, how he walks, right? So next we need to check how do we implement this in a sub animation blueprint. And why sub animation blueprints? Because all of these are different walk animation blueprints, but later on they will all be collected in the AI animation blueprint. But we come to that in a second. So we go animation BPs, and now we're gonna take a look at where we have it, the spear. Let's just search it. Blend space spear. Here we go. So we have here, and this is basically you already have this it already comes with the asset. I think it is the unnamed epic thing, right? If we go in here, yeah, we can just do it here. So first we save an idle save pose. So here you exchange the idle pose for your character, right? That he uses when he doesn't walk. And if you want them to able to crouch, you just plug it in here. But here's a normal walk cycle. Here you can see idle. We use the idle saved pose. And in moving, we just plug in here the blend space we just created with the direction and speed. And you can just create this variable, they are not here magically, you just create them, but you don't need to do any calculations because we do that in the main animation blueprint. Okay, and as you can see here with the spear, I did the exact same thing. We have here the idle, and in standing we have this. Only thing here we have a turn in place pose basically. So if he's standing and just turns left and right, he will do these animations. I'm going to show you this here, a little stand, so you can copy this if you like. So lean normalization, you clamp it, and then you decide, okay, here's left and right, and depending on the normalization, he will go play the animation for left and for right. Okay, and these are in place animations, by the way. Okay, so now we have the animation blueprint for this. Now we need to see how we can actually apply this to our AI, and for that we use the animation blueprint. So this is the base blueprint. If we go to animation graph, here we were there before, like where we took out the IK. Most of the stuff is not really important, except these two things. We have the base pose, which is the most important, because the base pose basically says in what animation state he's in. So if he is just walking around without a weapon, a drawn or anything, or if we want the spear animation we just created, if he should go into that animation state, right? So he walks with the blend space we just created. So what you can do is you simply go here, copy this here, and you rename this spear, right? And now what we need to do is we need to do conduit here, conduit there. So connection to and from there. And as you can see here, we don't have these, but we need these. So we can just click in here real quick, go back, and now they come here. And now we need to decide when can he go in here. And here comes in something we used at the very beginning. So we just say base pose, right? Get base pose, which is an animation tag. And then you say is equal. And here you can now, do you remember at the very beginning we added like a tag list? And this tag list we use now because now we say spear. So the animation tag is animation base spear. And if the base pose is this tag, we actually go into the spear animation. And now we can copy this and we go to the condition basically when he should leave this. So, and when does he leave it? If the animation pose is not equal, right? So you say if this base pose is not equal to this animation tag, then you leave here and then he will check for another place to go. Where you get this base pose tag, we later see when we set up the AI for actual use, right? When we set up the AI, how they should behave, I mean, of course, right? So, and then the last thing we need to do is we need to go in here because at the moment there's this unnamed epic blueprint in there. And now we go in here and go animation blueprint spear, right? These turn all red because we need to expose them. And as you can see here, we have direction, velocity, and idle, right? And these we kind of need, we don't need to calculate because this animation base blueprint is basically a parent class of AGR core anim instance. And under the hood, you don't see it, but under the hood, show inherited variables, you can go here on the little eye icon. Under the hood, this blueprint already calculates a lot of these values. So if you go in here, you click all these opens, all these values are already calculated under the hood, and you don't need to do that yourself. So if you ever are in need of any new variables to use, you can first check in here. For example, swimming, standing, crouching, grounded, all of these are already calculated. For example, here we need lean now. So what we go here, we have lean. So we just plug it in and we have our animation set up. So now the AI is able to hold a spear and actually play the spear locomotion animations. And all the animation for the attacks is what we used the animation montage for, we used at the very beginning. Okay, so this is basically everything you need to do. We just save it, and now the animation part is basically done, right? So you do the locomotion, and for every attack you do what we did to the animation montage. So you set up that it's full body, and then you set up like what weapons to trace, then the dodge notify, and also all the things we do in the beginning. This is it for the animation part. And then part 4, the next one, will be actually now we go into the AI base and we finally take a look at this and how to set up a new AI from scratch. Okay, so look forward to it and see you in the next part. Alright, and now for part 4, what we're gonna do is we're gonna take finally a look at the AI base class. And at first, what I want to do is show you around this blueprint before we actually go and make a new AI and tell her what to do, basically. Okay, so first thing you need to know is that all your AI should derive from this AI base blueprint. So what you need to do normally is right click, create blueprint, create child blueprint class, and then we say this new AI, and in here is all the code you have here, but you can manipulate it to your own needs, what you need for this specific AI. But the base AI and all other AI in your game, you kind of gonna code in here basically. So if you want to change something globally for the whole AI you're working with, you have to change it in here. Okay, so let's take a look at it and see what we have here. So if you go to the event graph, we're gonna do it in order of the begin play. Okay, the first thing we have here is assign mesh, which does exactly this. And here's basically 2 ways to do it. First of all, if you want a random mesh for this AI, for example, if it's a guard or like a enemy number 5 or whatever, you can just add as many random meshes you want here, and these are all soft references, so they're only loaded in if they're actually gonna be used. You just add them here, and then they will automatically decide one and gonna assign it to the skeletal mesh. If you don't have anything in here, he does a check here, so if you have no random meshes selected, he will automatically use the mesh you have selected on the mesh component right here. Of course, what you can also do is you can just add one mesh here, and it will always only use this mesh, right? That's what I normally do when I have just when I want a specific character model for this AI. I just add one in the random character mesh, just to get in the habit of using it. Okay, then go back, and next we set difficulty. This is what I did. I have here an enumeration that you can add in the variables. Oops, sorry. Difficulty, you have it here. And that is something you can set in any AI child blueprint class, right? Whenever you make a child of this, you can just set difficulty and it will automatically do this calculation basically. And what I did in this case is I have easy, normal, hard, extreme, and legendary, and depending on which difficulty I select, he will assign a specific amount of health, max health, and damage, right? So he gets stronger and more durable the harder you go. Of course, there's other things to consider in an AI difficulty, but I just gave you these 3 because they're easy to do. And they are very useful in general to create a little sense of change in difficulty. But whatever you want to do for your AI, you can just code in here and take these values to kind of drive them and change the difficulty of your AI. Next up is the voice pitch, and the voice pitch is used for the voice box. And let's actually go in here. I showed this already in the animation tutorial, because a notify in the animation is used to kind of like trigger this this play sound node, right? And depending on what you set up in the animation, in the enumeration, you can say shout, speak, activity, idle, and damage. And depending on that, it will go in here and play the sound. And here comes the voice pitch. So the voice pitch basically is a random height of the voice. So there's a low voice and a high voice. The pitch of the voice is randomly assigned to each AI. So each AI, even if they use the same sounds for the fighting sound or the speaking sounds, they will each have like an individual sounding voice, because we change the sound of that. And then we have a little delay just to let everything sink in, and then we set up the AGR Pro, right? And what we set here is basically just the baseline of the AGR we use for the animation, right? So this is just the base setup. It will most likely, or not most likely, it will most definitely be immediately overwritten whatever you have in your first phase, which is normally the idle phase. That will set, each phase will set this up automatically themselves, whatever you define there. Oh yeah, and voice box, I totally forgot. Of course, this is just like two example things. What you can of course do is like add here your own, or what you can also do is, for example, speak. You can make a branch and then have here some condition. For example, if he speaks, you can say in what location he is, and depending on the location, he says this or he says that, right? Just so you know. So after the AGR setup, we go to Combat Master. Combat Master is basically, we also talked about that in animation, is where you define the trackers for your hit calculation. So as your hit traces, right? So you define the tracker and the name of the tracker. So here you have of course my trackers, but you can of course always do your own. For example, if tracker R, I did now here as an example. Normally it was here or we can also do here. Normally it was the sword, and now here's like in the head. Maybe he's like a head-butting enemy. So now you have it here. Right, so you can always just assign these trackers on a specific socket. For example, I don't know, sword socket R, and now we put it in here, and then we just have to select it. Now we just have to put it in position basically, so that it aligns with the sword he would normally carry, and then he would track this this primitive basically, and if there's any hits, he will do some damage. And speaking of damage, we go there right now. Do damage. Here we go. If of these hit traces is any object is hit, it will spit it out here, register hit, right? And then here we do some calculations, check that we don't double hit an enemy, and then we apply the damage. Here you can have certain damage types. If you have several damage types and you want different damage type per enemy, you can always go in here and say promote to variable. And now you can say instance editable. And what's going on here? Why is it always switching? I don't know. Okay, so you can always instant editable and spawn on expose on spawn, and that will make it so that each AI can have their own variable for the damage class. And damage, here's also, you can see this, damage is a baseline value, so 20, and from this he will say divided by 2 and times 1.5, so 50% more and 50% less, and then he will take a random float, and that is a damage. So he will not always do exactly 20 damage in this case. But if you want exact damage, you can always just connect it here, and then whatever you type in damage is damage. But remember, this is for every AI because we're in the base class, so you need to be careful here to not fuck everything up for every other AI you are going to use. If you want to have more control of it, what you can also do is, of course, just do this. So you basically make two variables here, and then you can say, okay, the max damage is, I don't know, 45, and here it's 40, right? And now we have two variables, and between these two variables there will be damage. So when there is an AI where you want exactly 45 damage, you just set both of these to 45, and he will always do 45 damage. And then we have our first interface call, which is damage info, and here's basically from this AI, he will send information over to the AI that is damaged. And there you will spawn hit particles and hit sounds, and you will see the impact location and the instigator and stuff like this. And let's actually jump right there, because it's also here at take damage node. As you can see, here is the damage info, and as you can see here, it's very rudimentary for now. It's I spawn hit particles, spawn particles here, and these can, for example, be sparks if you're hit by a sword or whatever. And then we can also spawn sound, here we can spawn sound, and these are arrays, so you can actually put in several of these. For example, if we go back here, do damage, as you can see here, these are also array variables, so you can have several. Something is wrong, it always goes away here. I'm gonna restart this program in a second. So you can have several hit particles in here, so that's not always the same particle that spawns. Okay, and then we go back here, and here's also like event take damage, where we calculate the health, and if we're here we get a message for damage. So the moment you lose health, you have get a message. Unless you are dead, then we go through the sequence of the AI dying, transitioning to ragdoll, or if you have death animation specified, he will play the death animation to a certain extent. I think it's around 70% before he goes to a ragdoll. If no death animations are in here, here he checks it. If there are no death animation, he will automatically go directly to a ragdoll. Okay. And then we continue. We have the combat master now. We have take damage, do damage. Now let's go to this event. So here we just set it for the controller, right? But now let's go to this. These are very important if you make a ranged AI. Okay, so whenever something is including shooting from your AI, this is very important. This is event by timer, and this timer is set to 0.1 seconds. So every 0.1 seconds, he will adjust the aim for the player. So for example, now if you want to say you want the AI to be a little bit worse at shooting, so you can say 0.5, so 2 times a second he will adjust his aim. So if the player or another AI is running very fast, it is very hard for the AI to actually shoot him, because he will not adjust fast enough for the running. But if you do it for 0.5, so it's 20 times a second he will adjust the aim, it's much more likely that he will hit the player. And of course this you can also expose to promote to variable, like accuracy. So now you have, if you put it here and make it instant editable and expose on spawn, you have now another value that gives you the possibility to adjust this per AI, right? If you don't have that, it's global. Every AI will be like this, right? And also, it's not a tick, but it still runs every 0.1 seconds. So what you can do, if you want so, is you make a branch here, and you set a variable, and you call this can do ranged. Make it here, and you make it also instance editable here. And now what you can do, every AI you create, you can say, can it do range damage? So if it can shoot, you enable it. If it doesn't, you disable it. And that means this timer will not start if it's a pure melee AI, and you just save a little bit of calculation time. I mean, it's not a very heavy one, but it's still calculation time. So you can, fine tune this with these two things. Just keep it a little bit more lightweight, depending on how many AIs you have on screen at the same time. And this goes basically through the whole system. You can always go in and make something a variable, so you can adjust it later when you have a child blueprint of this base AI, and have everything be able to be adjusted on AI, basically, on a specific basis. So now we have this. This is begin idle. So the first time we hit, no, not the first time. Every time we begin the idle phase, which is most likely normally the normal phase you start an AI with, what we're going to do is we delete the focus. So this is especially important if the AI was previously in combat, has still, for example, the player as a focus, but he's not actually attacking us anymore because he's now in idle phase. If we wouldn't delete the focus, he would always face in the direction of the player. But by deleting the focus, we basically reset the AI completely, and they will look at whatever they want to look at, but not always at the player. Okay. What else we have here? We have shot fired node, which is basically just says the AI, okay, I'm gonna shoot now. And it's also multiplayer ready, so it's casted, and not casted. It's over the server and multicasted. And also the sound is replicated, right? Replicated, that's the word. So everything here is replicated. The shoot itself is already replicated because we use the Easy Ballistic plugin, which is automatically replicated. And here we just simply replicate the shooting sound. And then we have some basic event, which is basically just this for now, but here you can add whatever else, whatever kind of events you want to add, just to keep everything a little bit more tidy. And this is just after death event, so we delete all the tags so that other AIs basically cannot detect this AI anymore. And then we destroy the phase AI component because we don't need it anymore, and we also deactivate the AGR sound master, which handles footsteps. Okay. Yes, and this is basically it. We have a couple other things in our functions, which is, well, we replicate the health and send it to the AI. Perform ranged attack. Here we basically just get the target and send it over, and also say shoot now, right? And then we have perform spell, which is kind of important because we have, I'm going to show you that, we have already a notify under our utilities, anim notify. As you can see here, we have the usual, we already talked about, a dodge shoot for shooting, it's like firearms, threaten, voice, and we also have a spell notify. And basically what that does, it sends, it tells the AI to use a spell, right? We go here And basically we have the same thing, like I always like to do this, spell type, and we have here area at location. So basically it takes the location of the AI target to cast a spell at that location. Area around caster, so that would be something like if you want to create like a force field around the AI, around this AI that uses a spell. And then we have fly at location, which, for example, is like shooting a fireball at a target. Then we have a buff where you can like say, okay, I want to, I don't know, maybe the AI heals herself, right? And you just say this, and here you can also define what spell to use. So this is a class. This is a class, it's an actor, so you can plug in whatever blueprint you want. I have an example blueprint, I'll show you that in a second. But let's first go here to perform spell. Basically we have here a switch on enumeration, and the enumeration is what we just defined, area at location, blah blah blah. And we have the spell that's already cast in here. And here you see an example for how I set it up to cast a spell at a location, right? This is simply, I just spawn it and everything, spawn it at the location of the A target. As you can see here, we get the face AI, which is this component that handles everything the AI does. We get the active attack target, we get the location of the target, and then we plug it into the spawn transform of the spawn actor, right? And the actor to spawn is what we defined in the anim notify. It's all sent here. And now let's take a look at our spell. It's under utility, spells. And here you see I already created a few ones. They're probably not working 100% because you don't have the particles I used, but you can still see how I set them up here. And important is that everything is a child blueprint of this spell base. In here is nothing, just the Niagara system. But basically it's just easier to have like one base class. And here we have at location. And here you can see the code. If you have some time, check it, how I basically say the spell should work. So what I do first is have a timeline where I have a little circle grow bigger, and at a certain amount of time, when he's the biggest the circle, he will trigger the apply damage and the Niagara system, right? And then the cycle will like get smaller and shrink. Okay? So that, but take your time looking at this. And this is basically how you do your own spells in here. So you can also do it, and you just have to write some logic there, however you want the spells to work. And you can always, like I said, it's very nice to have. You can always use this to get the target you want the spell to be directed at. Okay? And this is basically it for how the base AI works, like under the hood. I'm not gonna go in detail how it works in the face AI because it's a little bit more advanced for this tutorial. But in the next part 5, I think it is, we finally are going to create an AI in the face AI component from start to finish, setting up how you go about checking how you go about setting up the AI and how it works. But before we finish this part, what I'm going to show you is examples. I'm going to show you how to set up a ranged AI. Apart from this, I'm going to go over that when we set up the AI. But the important part is event tick. We have here the same thing. We have a branch ranged mode, and then what we have, this is very important, we have a muzzle that's here, which is basically the point where the easy ballistic plugin will spawn the bullet, and we set the world location at a certain place. So in our case, we have a rifle mesh component, and this mesh component has a socket called muzzle, and this is where we on tick put the muzzle location, right? We do it this way because this way we can have it separate from the location. If we would immediately snap the muzzle flash and bind it to the rifle socket, what can happen is that they basically snap up while they shoot, and they will always miss because the socket will basically transform and go up right at the moment where you're shooting, and then you will always shoot up in the sky, or the AI will always shoot up in the sky, and this way we have only the location following the rifle, but the rotation is totally separate and will be calculated right here with this event, right? Range trace ranged. Talking too much now. Okay, this is it for how this works, and now we're gonna see how it works to set up the AI to actually do what we want there to do. See you in the next part. Okay, so now we talked about a lot of stuff like setting up the animations, how the inner workings of the base blueprint works and stuff like this. But now let's get into the nitty gritty and see how we can actually set up an AI that does what we want the AI to do. So first thing you need to do is go to base AI folder, click on the AI base, right click and create a child blueprint class. This is basically it's a child of it, so you can call new AI, and basically now we have this. And if you go here to event graph, as you can see, everything is empty because everything runs under the hood. So everything you want to change with this AI, you can now put here into the event graph, okay, without touching all the other stuff that we see in the AI base, like this, right? So now we need to think about, okay, what do we want the AI to do? What kind of AI should it be? And I think, this whole AI package is focused a lot on melee combat, right? So this is basically the main focus of the game I develop it for. And of course you can use it for everything, but melee is really a big focus. So first thing we want to do, if you go here on the left and you go here on AI new AI, right, or however you named it, you have here now all the variables that you exposed. For example, here is the damage. Remember, we did min-max damage. So we say now maybe 25 and 50. Between these two values, damage will be, it will not have ranged damage type, whatever, it's just some damage. Then we say maybe 250 is the max health, and if we say here 250, he has like full health, but we can also say he has maybe 150. That means he already is a little bit damaged. Okay, then we have no death animations, particles, and hit sounds we don't have at the moment, so we just leave it empty. Now tank score, we can decide, okay, is he maybe more of a tank? Then we say 10. Or is he more like a nimble assassin kind of type, who nobody really attacks or something? Then we say 0 because he's like stealthy in a group fight, So, but we leave it at 5 just because of it. And of course here, shooting, damage, shooting sound, all of these we don't really have at the moment in this project, so we just leave them empty. Muzzle flashes, you have some basic muzzle flashes from my muzzle flash pack. If we open this up here, you can see here we have this nice little red thing. You can change the color of this, by the way, if you go to sparks and you see here, you can just change the colors if you want, but we leave it like this. Voice pitch, it is exposed to us, even though we don't expose it. You can see here some values are still exposed for some reason. So even if you change it here, it will be set automatically either way. Difficulty we leave to normal, and as you can see, per AI you can also change the values here. So we can say, even if this is AI and we play on easy, you can still say, okay, but this particular AI is maybe starts with a 2 times multiplier on easy, right? And then he is maybe like 5. You can switch things up. And these are basically the base main values that you want to set up. Next things next is we actually go into AI coordinator. I like to do this first, because now what we're gonna do is we're gonna set it to maybe it's in a Viking, right? And now what we can do is we also add attack, maybe also Viking. And this is just like, I would always set the tags everywhere just in case, right? Oh, Viking. Yeah, let's say Vikings actually. Here we go, Vikings. Zack. So now every AI who sees this particular AI here knows this is a Viking, because this has the tag Viking, so it's a Viking, right? Next thing we want to do is we actually want to sell now. Okay, what does the AI actually do? So when I actually close all of this down, so we have a little overview and it looks a bit more clean. So we go now to this face AI component. This component is basically controls the AI, right? Everything you set here is how the AI will behave. Okay, so how do we start? I always like to start from these numbers, so 0, 1, 2, and then 3, right? So we start with 0, and first thing here, we have the behavior tree. That's the next part. For now we leave it. This is just basically in here is saved how the AI behaves in a certain phase, right? So normally the default base face tree will be totally fine, or behavior tree will be totally fine. We just leave it. So then replicated and is alive. Normally you just want to have them standardly ticked on, and then starting phase. Normally, I think 90% of the time, in my case, I start in idle, maybe even 95%. I start the AI in idle. But of course, you can also say maybe it's a patrolling AI. So it starts in patrol, or it starts in investigate, or whatever, I think for our case, we say it starts in idle. Okay, so general is done. This is just, how does it start? And then we go to the idle settings, because it's the first state we're actually in, and it's a very important state. That's why I make it in its own category. If we go in here, we leave it like this for now. If we go in here, you see the first thing you want to check is like, okay, we have idle variation. So what kind of idle state should the AI be in? We have 4 states. We have stand, so the AI simply stands the way you put them in the level. Then we have roam, and you have here roam distance, so within 600 unreal units, the AI will walk around. And roam delay is basically after it reaches the destination that picks randomly within 600 units, it will wait there 5 seconds before again searching for a new location in 600 units away, or between his position and 600 units, right? Then we have activity. We come to that later. Basically, we have activity blueprints that you can set in the world, and once you set them, they will basically the AI will go there and will perform like an animation, right? This can be sleeping, this can be working on something, this can be eating, it can be buying something, can be everything. Every AI you put there, it will go there and just simply will do it. And then of course we have talking, so it goes to another AI that can talk and talks to it 5 seconds, right? Okay, for now we say maybe just roam around. Okay, before we actually do that, I want to tell you something about activity. I go into detail later on, but activity has something special, because under AI coordinator you find something called members of camp, and basically every AI you can define a camp. For example, a Viking camp 2, right? And later on in our activity blueprints, we can also define a camp. So each activity belongs to a camp, and every AI belonging to this camp can go to that activity. So that way you can basically classify which AI can use which activity, because the activity is also chosen randomly. But this way you have a little bit more control in where the AI goes, basically. Okay, but let's go back to face and we say roam. Okay, so now we have here idle face, and this one is actually specific for every phase. Let's go for melee, for example. All these phases are built in the exact same way. They have idle phase or melee main phase, and in here you have like some standard variables, and underneath that you have always specific values specific to the phase. For example, here melee has melee distance, so when will they attack, and then transitions and randomize melee, whatever. These randomizations are also quite common, but for example, if we go to ranged, we can say ranged distance, ranged attack speed, numbers before reloading, and stuff like this. If we go to defend, we have here defend variation. So is it a melee, ranged, or special defense, and stuff like this. So, but these idle phase and this drop down menu is these values are always the same for every single phase. Okay, so let's go through this. So in the idle phase, first of all, the phase is idle. Normally you don't want to change this. And here we already set up the AGR setup. So we have the base pose. In my case, idle is always mocap basic. Okay. Then you have an overlay pose. You maybe don't use it so often. You maybe use it, for example, for ranged attack. So when they're just walking around normally, they have the weapons showing down, but the moment they go into range attack, you can actually set an overlay to start a pistol, for example, to have them raise a weapon before they shoot. Okay, to just adjust a little bit the animation. But for now, we say none. Okay, then we go back here to rotation setting. We have here none, rotate to velocity, so basically they turn wherever they're walking to. Absolute rotation is whatever they basically always turn exactly where they want to look at. Desired rotation is kind of similar, but it's has a little bit more leeway. And desired at angle is basically they will turn at a specific angle. Let's say 90 degrees or something like this. You can put that in. You can put that in here if we go to AGR setup. We can set here a turn at angle that is specific desired at angle. He uses this value. Okay, and then we have rotation speed is exactly that. Okay, I personally like desired or absolute rotation, mostly the best. Okay, then we have target tags. So in here you put all the tags against whom they should fight or whom they should consider a target. So with player, maybe there's also team red or something like this. Whatever targets the enemy should have, basically, right? Then we have animations, right? In idle, it's not used so much, but for example, in combat situation, like in the combat main, for example, animations. Here you put all your attack animations, for example. Okay. Then we have sound. This is always played at the very beginning of a phase. So when the phase starts, you will play a certain sound. Then we have a delay. So, for example, you can use that in defense. So he goes into the defense state, and after 3 or 4 seconds, you can go here. After 5 seconds plus minus 2, he will go into dodge or something like this. So whatever phase you want them to go in next. If it's all 0, nothing will happen. And then we have inside and loose side, exactly what it is. So when, for example, he sees the player, he attacks the player. So inside, so he sees, okay, there's another actor with attack player. I go and attack the player. And this face into always means he will go from this face. This is, oh, we're on melee at the moment already. Okay. So here, let's do it again. Inside, player. You say here, player. If you see the player, you go to attack him. And attack him means melee main or secondary or special or ranged. Or you can also say defend. So he goes first in a little defense state and then he attacks. Let's actually do taunt. Okay? I don't have animation. No, maybe I have animations for that, but let's go in here. So we have now taunt. That means the moment the AI sees the player, he goes into the taunt state, right? We look at the taunt state in a second. First, we finish up here. So next, we have lose sight. So you can also say if you don't see the play anymore. So this is maybe not so useful in idle, but would maybe be more in combat. So if he's in combat, we actually do it later on in combat. And then we have simple within range and beyond range. For example, what you can do here is like if the player comes here, player, if the player comes within 200 units of this AI, we will attack him. If we see it, you can say line of sight if we see him or if we don't see him, right? Perfect. And then with beyond range, health, we can say, is it, for example, smaller than 50%? Then we go and run away, right? And we can also say one time only, so it can only happen once. And then afterwards we have movement speed. So in this phase, for example, he just has 180 movement speed. The movement speed, of course, because it is in this phase, you can always set for every single phase. So in every single phase, the AI can be faster or slower. Okay? So now, before we go to melee, we actually have to go to reactions. Because under reactions, we have dodge, taunt, hit, and stun. Okay? Actually, talking about hit, what we're going to do is we go to idle and we go to messages. Right? Now it's already by default in here. As you can see, as you maybe remember, whenever you get damaged, you also get a message. And a message is basically like, oh, something happens, and what is the information of that happens. The message is damage, so we phase into hit. So when you attack this AI and he gets damaged, he will automatically go into the hit phase. And the hit phase is basically, you can basically ignore everything here, because everything in the hit phase they will do is play an animation. For example, hit. Do we have something here? Hit body, Carano. Let's say this one. So everything that we'll do is say they play this animation. This, of course, is only because we set it up like this in our behavior tree. If you change your behavior tree under the hit phase, of course you can also utilize all of these other things. But we come to that later. So now hit is set up, and all we need to do basically, we can now say transition. Right? That's the next thing. You always have a transition from one phase to another. For example, after you are hit, you can either flee, defend, or attack. So as you can see here, we have a randomized hit. So we can say if we uncheck that, he will always use the first one. He will always say hit, transition is always flee. If we say randomize hit, right, randomize the transition, we have two more options and he will choose one of these three. The thing is, you always have to have three, right? So you can, for example, also say defend is now 2, so to 66% he will go to defend. Or if you say flee a second time, to 66% he will flee. Or you say attack, so one of these options can be 33%. Okay? So now we go taunt, because if we see the player, we go into the taunt phase. And the taunt phase is very similar to the hit phase, that we basically only play an animation, right? So we play here taunt. I have some taunt animations right here. So what's special about this taunt phase is also that you need, let's actually do a longsword here. We make him a longsword fighter. So Kubert longsword, right? The special thing about here, or the different thing about this one from hit, is that hit is instantly just place the animation and it's done. Taunt, you will have a movement speed, let's say 360. He will run in, how to say, he will run close to the target. And I think this one is set up so that it's like 600. Let me actually check. We go behavior tree, just so I don't say anything wrong at this point. We need to find taunt. I go over all of this later on. I just want to not say anything weird. Plan them. Oh no, it's actually just place it, I guess. Yeah, maybe set it up. I will check it later. Yeah, but basically just place the animation, so I didn't say anything. It's just that. Okay. So and after this we also, so it's basically he sees the enemy, right? And he just wants to taunt the player a little bit. Okay. So he plays some animation. Here you can place as many animations as you want. He will pick randomly one animation of this, right? He doesn't play all of them. He plays one, right? And now we say, okay, after this he goes maybe to attack or secondary attack, which is just the same, but it's just like I have 3 attack states, so you can cycle through different kind of animations or attacks, basically. Or he goes into defend, right? So, and now let's only put here one taunt, right? So here. So, and here, as you can see, you can also put everything inside, but as you know, he already has the target now, because we already specified the target when we entered this phase, right? So you don't need to do anything else. What you can do here, of course, also is set a message. So in the time where he does a taunt and he gets damaged, he also gets back to hit, okay? With this, you have to be a bit careful. If you want to be able to basically stun lock the enemy, you can always add the message damage and hit. If you don't want him to be able to do that, I would recommend in some phases don't do the message thing. Okay, just to be on the sure side that it doesn't cycle unlimited. Okay, except of course it's what you want. But next is attack. Okay, as you can see already, just like a little bit how I approach this. Whenever I start with the first phase I'm starting with, and then I basically go through all the phases, how I set them up. So as you can see here in idle, we set up hit, defend, and melee and taunt. So the next phases I go into are all these phases, right? So we start with hit, with taunt, and now the next one would be melee main, right? So first we set the text distance, maybe it's 250. After that, we maybe go to the next attack, or we go to a defend, or we actually go maybe to a dodge. Now let's say maybe another way is to attack immediately again, and we randomize it. Then we open this up, and we say here also long sword, because this is it changes on any phase, so you always want to have the same base pose for each phase if they have the same play style. If they switch between maybe 2 swords and then go for a long sword, or switch to a long sword or something like this, of course then you change the base pose. But in general they have one attack kind, right? So you always stick to the same base pose. And overlay pose, you don't have to set it if there's nothing, but I just like to sometimes set it to none. And then here we have animations, attack animations. We just search for some long sword animations. As you can see, I copied it over, as you remember from my other project, so I have some animations here to show you. But all of these, if we go in here just to show you, all of these are set up exactly the way we did it in the animation phase, right? Activate, dodge, blah, 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 right? So, we don't want to play sound. Inside, yeah, we still have it on, but we don't really need it. We have already a target. Of course, he can change, from one phase to another. But for now, we just take it out. And of course, what we can also do, for example, if we want to do maybe an enemy that is a ranged enemy and you have to kill him in ranged, because every time you get close within ranged, he will maybe dodge immediately, right? So player, if he's in within 250 unreal units, he will automatically dodge. So basically he will try to always avoid you whenever possible, right? That's maybe one way to do it. And he has maybe movement speed of 400 in this one. Okay, here it makes no sense, I just realized. Because we are in the melee thing, so every time he would attack, he would immediately dodge. So he would never be able to attack, so we leave this out, right? Okay, and yeah, one more thing. As you know, if we go here, in our attacks, we have this dodge notify. And this dodge notify is actually a message, right? Here, a message. So what you need to do in order for this AI to be able to dodge is you need to add a message called dodge and then phase into dodge. So here, dodge, dodge, right? If you don't set this, and he receives a dodge notify from the attack of the enemy, he will not be able to dodge. For example, that enables you to, for example, do something like, as long as he is in the main melee phase, he is able to dodge, but in the second melee phase, you don't set the message, so whenever the player attacks the AI while the AI is in the second phase of the melee attacks, he will not dodge, right? But in the main melee phase, he is able to dodge if he gets a message, right? So this way, you can have very complex interactions and very complex setups when he goes into what phase, right? And remember that all of these settings here we set here with the messages are only applying to this one phase, right? They don't carry over here. What you can do, of course, if you want to have the exact same settings here, whatever you can do is you can go here, right click on melee main phase, copy this, then you go to secondary, here melee secondary phase, and paste it in. You can do that because the structs underneath are exactly the same. So you can just copy it over and then switch it up here, maybe some different animation you put in here, right? Just switch it up a little bit and maybe change a little bit the distance when they attack and maybe a little bit the movement speed and stuff like this, right? So after this, maybe attack again, go to dodge, to defend, right? So this is all nice and well. This is basically how you set this up. Next thing is we haven't actually set up a dodge yet. Okay, so we do the exact same thing. First of all, we set the transition. So after the dodge, he maybe attacks again, or he goes into defend, or maybe he taunts him again, right? Next, we set cool animation, the base pose, right? Then the tags again, player, we leave it. And then animation, and that's important because the dodge, at least in my case, the dodge is a root motion animation, right? So we put it in here and we search for dodge. I have a dodge already set up. So here, this is the long dodge, and you can also do here, right? You can do different kind of dodges, and every time he will dodge, he will choose a different kind of dodge. So he doesn't always dodge the same way. So in this case, this Cobalt animation pack, if we go here, has different kind of dodges in different directions. So for example, left, right, and forward and back, right? So if you have all 4 animations in here, he can always dodge left or right or backwards, randomly, right? So he doesn't always dodge backwards, that's a bit repetitive. So this way you can also make it a little bit more randomized and everything. Movement speed in this case is also not so important, because this is also one of these phases where they simply play the animation, right? He gets the message, he plays the animation, and after the animation he immediately transitions to the next phase, okay? Yes, and then we have ranged. Like I said, we have ranged distance, for example 2000 units. He attacks once a second. After 5 attacks, he reloads. You have to have a reload animation. And in here, oh no, you actually don't need it. Okay, no. Okay, there was once where I have like a notify, but I think I took it out. Either way, so and the animation actually has to play through for him to reload. So if you stop him before he loads, I think he needs to reload again. He gets into the range phase. Okay. And here again, you have the transitions. What does she do afterwards? Put in whatever you want. And in the struct, you have exactly the same thing. Maybe this time it's more like a pistol thing. But yeah, so it's very detailed. You really have to think about, how do he goes from one phase to another, and when. You have different kinds. You have transitions. You have messages. Loose sights, within range, beyond range. You can also say, for example, when he's in whatever combat mode, here, combat phases. When he's in there and he has maybe the player, let's see, here the player is beyond 3,500 units of the AI, he will automatically go back to idle and forget basically that the player existed. Okay, that's a possibility. You can also say health if the health is below or equal to maybe 20%, he will flee. Okay, and he does it one time. And then we go to reactions. We go to movement actually. Flee here, and then you set up flee. Flee distance. He runs away 3,000 units, and after that he goes back to idle, or he comes back to attack, or whatever. So you have a lot of possibilities here. It looks complicated at the first, but the more you look into it, the more you use it, it gets very, very logical how they go from phase to phase. And it's very, very powerful because each phase is really individual from everything else. So each phase can be totally different. So this is one thing, but there's more. Because what you can do if you go here to begin and end, that's very important. I think you find them here. Perfect. Okay, if you go down here to events on Phase AI and then events, you see here on begin idle or on end defend. These are I forgot the name now. Event dispatcher. That's the name. So these are event dispatchers. That means what you can do is you say when he, and you just click on the plus here, on and idle. So here you can define what they are doing when they're leaving the idle phase, right? And this will trigger every time they leave the idle phase. So that's something you have to remember. Or you can also say if you begin, for example, defend what do? You can do something the AI should do, or you can also do like equip the weapon and stuff like this. So for example, if we go here to and no, here player, no, where is it? Here, base, examples, ranged. For example, here on idle begin, I unequip the sword. That's something I did. And on idle end, or on end idle, I actually equip the sword. So, and you see here, we have basically just a little thing that we do. It's attach component to component. So we attach the sword to the mesh at this socket, right? And on unequipped sword, we do exactly the same thing, but we have a different socket. So he basically puts it to the back, right? So here, if the sword is unequipped, it's on the back socket. And if it's equipped, it's in the hand, right? And as you can see here, we put this away. So as you can see here, we already have a sword. We put it as a static mesh, and we already, just for the sake of it, we already attached it to the hand. But we can of course also say back. It doesn't matter really where it is. So now it's at the back. Like I said, it doesn't matter where it is, because at the very beginning, here at the very beginning on idle begin, he will unequip the sword and will automatically be at the back. Okay, it's kind of confusing that equip sword, that they're not like where they should be. But yeah, so this is basically how you use event dispatchers, and I personally mostly use it for equipping weapons and stuff like this, but you can virtually do everything here. You can write all your own code here. You can also say play sound, so at location. So whenever he goes uh, out of the idle phase, he plays a sound. Or what you can do is play spawn system, right? So you can have a system, you attach it to the thing, and whenever he leaves the idle, maybe he explodes, or maybe he's set on fire, or whatever. Everything you can do here. And this is basically it. It's not so complicated once you know how it is, but at the beginning it can be very overwhelming. So I would just recommend to you, play around a little bit, check how the little interactions can happen, and really just go from phase to phase. So start with the idle phase and then define how from the idle phase the AI really can go to another phase, and then go to the next phase where you go from the idle. Like for example, here we have inside is taunt, and then you go next to combat, reactions, taunt, and then you define everything in the taunt phase, and then you go from here. Okay, taunt transition is melee main, so I go to melee main and set up everything here. That's a very good way to do it. And just play around with it, and if there's any question, of course, you can always ask me in the comments. But yeah, this is how you set up your AI, and then all you need to do is drop it in the world. Oh no, this is the wrong one. All you need to do is really now drop your new AI in the world. And of course, it's also very important. If you go down here to show and you say navigation, so you see here this green box. This is very important because this is used for the AI to know where they should navigate. And you set this by searching here, place actors, nav mesh, bounce volume. That's what you want to place. For example, here on, let's actually place it, here on the bridge. Nav mesh bounce volume here. And as you can see already, if I scale it up, I don't see my mouse here. If I scale it up, you can see that it gets green, and everywhere where it's green, the AI can walk to. Okay. And another thing is, if you set, that's actually also good to know, if you set a patrol path, of course the AI needs to be in, my mouse is gone, what the heck? Okay, the AI actually needs to be in patrol mode, and then they should actually find automatically the patrol. Let's actually check it. We go here. I'm not sure if I already automated it. It was actually on my list, but I'm not sure it is already. Let's just check it. We go here to movement, and we go to patrol. Oh no, you still have to set it yourself. So if an AI should go to a specific AI path, a patrol path, you have to go in here, take the picker, and then pick the patrol path, right? And then you can say once loop and back and forth, right? Yes. So, and the rest of the patrol is set up like you would always set it up. And you find the patrol under utility BPs and patrol, and then here's a little thing you can take, and you drag it out and move it around, and this is the path the AI will go. If the AI is not there yet, I can show you if I can select it. I don't know why. I think when I record this, I cannot see my mouse in the viewport there. If we go now to AI, let's see here, AI, and then we go to movement, and we select here patrol here, and now we go into simulate this. You will see he will automatically go to the beginning of the path, and then automatically follow the patrol spline, right? I don't know what's set up. Yeah, loop is set up. So even if the spline is not closed, he will automatically run to the start when he reaches the end. Okay, this is how you set up the AI and tell him what to do. And the next part and the last part, we actually gonna take a look at our behavior tree and how you can adjust it so you can actually go even deeper in telling the AI what they should do. Okay, so see you in the next part. Okay, now for the last part of this tutorial, we are going to take a look at the behavior trees. As we did in the last part, set up everything like how the AI should behave, and in in regards to how they transition to each phase. The behavior tree, you find it under utility, behavior tree objects, and then here's the behavior tree. The behavior tree basically determines what the AI does when they are inside of the phase. Okay, for example, here we have the idle phase, the patrol phase, and if we zoom out, every phase is right here. Okay, with here, for example, melee attack. And this is basically, if you want to make a new one, you can just simply right click here, duplicate this, and we call this 2 whatever, and we open this up now because we're gonna play around in here a little bit. So how does this work? First of all, these are the actions that are that are basically done when they enter the phase. Okay, so if he goes to main attack phase, he will start on the left and go all the way to the right. Okay, you see here these little numbers. If you hover over them, they turn red. So 51, 52, 53, 54. These numbers are not really important. Only important is that they always go from left to right. So if I go here, for example, you see the numbers changing, and now this one would be done first. So what is happening? So when he enters the main attack phase, first of all, he's gonna try to find a target. Here you have the option. Here, focus attack target. That means he basically will look at the target, right? Afterwards, he moves to the target melee. Okay. When he arrives there, he will attack the target. So basically, he will simply play the animation, and then he will transition to the next phase. So whatever we set up for phase transition will happen. We can actually go in here, double click this, and as you can see here, we have all the choices that all the choices are basically connected. It looks very weird. You never have to go in here. I just wanted to show off a little bit. So now this is basically how it always happens. So for example, ranged attack, set attack target, attack the target, move to target, and then wait a little bit, attack speed. We come to that in a second, and then do it again. Okay. And for example, we have investigate, rotate to BB key, wait a little bit, move there, wait a little bit, investigate, and search for the next point to investigate. Okay? Or we go to flee, search for a point to flee to, move there, and transition to the next phase. We have dodge, just simply play the animation and then transition to the next phase. If we have the melee defense, as you know, defense you can also switch on to melee defense, ranged defense, and special defense. And here's basically search a place, move there, and play an animation maybe, right? Same here. Go into cover means he basically crouches down, and before that he searches a place and he moves there. As you can see, basically in these phases, you will basically break down whatever the AI should do into steps. Okay, so like into logical steps. For example, here attacking again. First of all, whom do you want to attack? Okay, you have to figure that out. Then you know who to attack. Then you go there, and then you attack. And afterwards, the phase is done, so you go to the next one. So very logical steps. So next is how do you define things? So for example here, set attack target is nothing to define except focusing target, yes or no. But if we go to move to target melee, we actually have here something called a target key. And in this case, you always want to have it on target key. But what I want to show you is that some objects here, you can actually enter keys. And these keys are normally dynamic. And you find these in the blackboard. Okay? Here you have all different kinds of keys. Like, for example, start location or target location or random distance or follow distance. And some of these are, for example, here attack speed, roam delay, follow distance, attack melee distance. All of these are keys that you set in the player. Okay, that you, no, not in the player, in the AI, in the face component. You know, some of these you will recognize because these you set up in the phases. Okay. Others, like the target actor, for example, are something the AI senses by herself and sets by herself. Okay, and all these basically are very easy because they are basically variables, and these variables you can set in here. For example, here you can see it's very good. If we go to move to target melee, we have, whoops, we have two keys in here. The first one is the target actor, which is automatically set by set attack target. And the second one is attack melee distance. And that, if we go back to the AI real quick, here, and we go to the face AI, and we go to combat main, we have that here, attack melee distance. And this is a distance when the AI comes within this distance of her target, she will start to play the attack. Okay, the attack animation. That means you can change this, for example, even though this is a main attack phase, if you switch this here to, let's say, attack range distance, then even though he is in this melee phase and he should take this, he will not take it because in the behavior tree you actually said use this attack range. Okay, normally it should be maybe something like 2000. Okay, um, because this is what you specified in the behavior tree. So the behavior tree takes values that you set up here, right? So you have to be very careful if you change something up that you plug in the right keys inside here. Okay, this is very important because maybe you will want to switch something up. For example, here's a good example. So, what does a ranged attack phase do? Okay, so let's see. We set an attack target, which is fairly standard, and then we attack the target, or we move closer to it. Okay, here, attack range distance. So, first we try to attack, and then if we can't, we go closer, and then we wait for the attack speed. Because this is very important, because basically this one is cycling around. So this is one here, it goes here, 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 and then it goes back. While in the others, we actually transition to another phase, so it's just one cycle. While in the ranged attack, you have several cycles before it changes um, to another phase. And how he changes in the ranged attack to another phase is normally by saying delay, maybe 5 seconds, and then plus minus 1, and then you go to maybe defense, right? So basically, this phase will run all the time until the delay triggers, right? So he will maybe attack for 6, 5, or 4 seconds. Okay. And what's also important here is that when this AI attacks, it will actually stay still because he will search a target and then he will play the attack animation, which is the attack, right? And that is because this is simply how this works. These things are working one after another. If you want to do something that constantly fires even while these other work, what you need to do is you need to right click here, and you can see here add decorators and add service. And in this case, we want to add a BTS, attack target range service. Okay, so we can delete this now. And what will happen now is, if you can see here, we have intervals, right? So we can say maybe, yeah, let's say maybe 1, and it's a deviation of 0.5. So what will happen now is the following. We actually don't really need this anymore, but we can just leave it in. This is just a little sheet. The AI basically takes a little pause, but this one will still run because this here runs constantly, while these run one after another. So when this is active, these two are not active. If this is active, these two are not active. Okay? That means now, no matter what happens in the phase itself, every 1 second roughly, this AI will attack. Okay, this is very important because this means no matter what else he does, it means he can actually shoot while running. Okay, this setup makes the AI shoot while running. Well, if we take this away and we simply say here ranged attack here, this AI will set a target, attack, move somewhere, and then wait. Okay? So, because this is just how it works. This is, for example, very nice if you have a ranged attack that has a big animation. Okay? For example, if it has a bow and he has to really stand and draw the bow very long time and then attack. then you should use this. If he has maybe a gun, what you want to do is you add a service, attack ranged, and set here an interval. Okay, because now he is very agile. He can move around while shooting, while setting new targets, and stuff like this. Okay, this is very important to understand. Okay, another thing is that I have a lot of different stuff already built in as one of these nodes. For example, go into cover is like he crouches down. If you go in here, it's very simple. He just like has like a little sphere trace where he can like go to and crouch down, and here's like crouch. Okay. Um, And actually built in, I have a lot of different things that I can show you real quick. You find them here in the folder. If we go to utility, here we have EQSs, and we have here DTS. So right, so here are basically DSTs. So basically, these are all the blueprint tasks or blueprint services that you can use, like patrol location, move to, go into cover, choose activity, attack target, talk, stunned, all these kind of things. And you can go in here and check how they are built. Most of them are very simple. And you can just check them out, how I built them up. And that way you can figure out how to make your own if you want to have custom things that the AI can do. Okay? Um, just, give it a look. This is maybe a little bit harder to understand. You can also find a lot of tutorials about this, but it's very useful at some point when you want to really make customized things that the AI can do, right? For now, I think if you're beginning, you don't really need to know all this, and the standard behavior tree is good for like, let's say 95% of the time. Okay, so I wouldn't worry too much about it. I just wanted to throw it in a little overview of what you can do. Also, I have a little face called options. That it's a blank option. So when you want to do something new, a new phase that you have not, that is basically not in here somewhere, um, then you can simply put your new phase here and call it options. And then you can just go here and we have it actually optional here. Optional phase. This is this one, okay? This you can, and then you can go here, attack target or move to, right? And then you can define here where should it move to and stuff like that, okay? So just wanted to throw it in there. I hope this tutorial helped a little bit. It was a bit lengthy, I have to say that, but I think now everything is in one place. You don't have to search too many others tutorials. And if there's any questions, don't hesitate to write me an email or write a comment in here. If you have questions or maybe you want to request a specific tutorial for something, we're going into more detail. Yes, so see you around and thanks for watching.